if someone was listening right now and they wanted to get stronger, improve their, let's say, squat, bench, and dead, because that makes it easy,
Yeah.
what would be a typical sets, reps, and frequency structure that you would put a person like that on? Let's say they can already do the movement.
Yeah.
They already execute it well. So they're not a complete beginner. But what would be a rough working set, rep, and frequency structure that you would put someone like that on?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. I suppose you have to sort of discount the different things that you would, for the individual that you take into
Yeah.
consideration. It's very, very general.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
You know, you wouldn't go wrong with, again, looking more longer term, because you could say, oh, this is a week's program, but it doesn't necessarily, the week's program doesn't necessarily give you anything. So if you talk like 12 weeks, so you've got 12 weeks
Yeah.
to get where you want to get to, or closer to where you want to get to.
Yeah.
I would have 4 training days in the week,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe do like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I would take, and these are the broad strokes, so you could actually structure something that made sense. But then
Yeah.
take like a high-low approach. High-low being the sort of high intensity work, then low intensity work, and I would class that as high intensity as above 80%, low
Yeah.
intensity below 70%, and or lower body upper body split.
Yeah.
So lower body work on the high day, upper body work on the low day, but that's more to do with the motor unit recruitment. So one of
Mm-hmm.
two, either high percentage on multiple lifts disciplines and then low percentage, or
Mm-hmm.
lower upper, and then
Yeah.
day off, repeat.
Yeah.
So that would
So
be,
the difference there for rep ranges, would that be like kind of 3 to 5 versus like 6 to 8 or
well,
something
no,
like that?
probably like 1 to 3, 1 to 3 on the
Cool.
high day.
Yeah. Nice.
As
Oh,
in, you
cool.
are working high percent. You're going high, so you said you're going to
Yeah.
go high. Don't sort of
Yeah.
meet yourself, get in the middle somewhere. So go
Yeah.
high, low volume, high intensity. Next day, lower volume, below 70%, and
Yeah.
then work on some other things. And that could be, with that model there, that kind of high-low model. Your high percentage really focused on the core disciplines that you want to get
Mm-hmm.
better at, and
Yeah.
maybe variations of that, but they're very, very close to the competition lift. And
Yeah.
then the next day is accessories, bodybuilding work, really maybe some higher level skill work, which actually can still be very demanding, but you literally can't really do anything above 70% because you've added so many constraints to it. So
Yeah.
high level of complexity, then obviously because complexity eats away at intensity, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that way, or the other way, which is the sort of lower upper split, which is basically traditional, which is probably the easier way to describe the sets and rep schemes. To be
Yeah.
fair, so your general rule. So you've got your primary lift. So if I was structuring a workout, primary lift, that's the thing you're working on that you want to be best at. The primary lift, squat, bench, or deadlift.
Mm-hmm.
You pick that. You probably want to do. You want to work at above 80%. You probably want to do somewhere like three sets of 2 repetitions above 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you pick a special developmental exercise, which is somewhere between 70 and 80%. And that can be 3 sets of 4 to 6, depending on the
Yeah.
exercise and the complexity of
Yeah.
the exercise. And then after that, you would do more of the work capacity type stuff. So you then take the muscles down more to the isolated. So isolated quads, isolated trunk, and
Yeah.
then, you know, 3 sets. I think the three, again, 3 sets. What's the evidence for 3 sets? It's probably more that it's a nice starting point because most people can recover from 3 sets or
Yeah.
sorry, 3, 6, and then the accessories, whatever that is, 9, 12 sets, say. 12
Yeah.
sets total. You got primary lift, competition lift, developmental exercise, work capacity, and
Mm-hmm.
then knock it on the head.
Yeah.
And that could
Yeah. That
be
makes
work
sense.
capacity could be 12 to 15 repetitions. That can actually be quite a high repetition because you're
Yeah.
actually
So
looking at,
that could that be like a leg extension or
yeah,
a
leg
leg
extension.
curl,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that?
yeah. You
Yeah.
could do, yeah. There's probably loads of things fit
Yeah.
in that continuum. But yeah, if you were
Yeah.
to get right down to the isolated exercise, so you want your quads to be strong
Yeah.
when you squat. So you probably want them to be relatively well developed in isolation.
Yeah.
The leg extension's good. And then some sort of trunk exercise. If you're obviously you want good pillar strength, it doesn't hurt to have good pillar strength, even though you've obviously worked on it already in the specific sense. But then you're
Yeah.
looking at doing one, and again, this comes back to that frequency thing. Again, if you're doing one hit a week on the squat, you probably definitely want to do some trunk work, because you're not going to get that repeated stimulus of throughout the week with the higher frequency.
Yeah. What are some typical trunk work exercises that you do? Is it like is it holds, like isometric hold type exercises, or?
I could be anything. Hanging leg
Yeah.
raises are one that I
Yeah.
would do more of. I do like dragon flags, leg lowers, whatever they're called, Rockies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
sort of that's more of a high level trunk exercise. They wouldn't be 12 to 15. You'd be an absolute animal if you did 12 to 15 of those.
Yeah.
Them regular crunches.
Yeah.
You can do holds as well, but I'd look at holds more along the lines of if you've got some kind of imbalance, then holds are brilliant. I wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily say hold, because you're sort of doing static holds anyway. Maybe try and integrate some different muscle groups into the through some sort of movement as well if you can. But then that's just, again, no real evidence for that. It's just preference.
Yeah.
And then the next day, same kind of format. So competition, developmental, work capacity. For like a bench press day, have a day off, and then repeat similar thing for the deadlift. Which obviously, and again, if you were to actually put everything down into like areas and movements, so you've got squat pattern, which is knee flexion, hip flexion exercise. So
Yeah.
let's say all our accessory stuff, and we're looking at anterior chain development. Then on the deadlift day, we're looking at posterior chain development. So they're the exercises that you pick to go in each one. On the bench press, you have bench press, but then you probably want, like, because you've only got two recovery days until you bench again, you probably want to go more for, I'm going to target, pectorals and deltoids as my work capacity accessories. Then on the next day, if you do it on the Friday, you've got Saturday, Sunday, Monday, you've got 3 days off. So that might be the day you say, yeah, that's the best day to actually do triceps and actually fatigue them more, because I've got a longer rest period until I bench press again. But yeah, general rules are, again, that's a very, very generic program, but I think you wouldn't go far wrong with that as a template. And then as progressions, it's just, you can use percentage progressions, you can use absolute progressions. I think I really like, for a beginner, intermediate beginner, starting strength kind of framework, Mark Rippertoe's starting strength framework is basically add 2.5 kilos when you go in. So his is more of a 5x5, the sort of Bill Starr 5x5 model. So it's like 5x5, next session 5x5, add 2.5 kilos. Next session 5x5, 2.5 kilos.
Yeah.
And you
just do that until you can't.
Basically, you do it until you can't. Yeah, but for a beginner, you can't really. That's such a starting strength is a book that pretty much every single S&C coach and strength, sort of anyone who's interested in strength, should read that book, and practical programming as well by him.
Starting strength and practical programming.
Because it's again probably more social. It's made more complicated now than it ever has been, and they're two books that literally go, you can get really, really strong in a very, very simple way. Small progressions over time. Basic barbell exercises, nothing fancy. Basic barbell exercises with the smallest progression you can make to call it progressive overload, and you basically do that till it stops.
Yeah.
Then you find then you look at
the element about that is that people can be so impatient, right?
Well,
I want to put a 10 on each side this week.
Yeah. Again, it's biological stress, isn't it? So if you understand like biological stress, you've done more. Your body can't necessarily perceive some of it, but you can only produce as much force you can produce. So put the least amount on to call it a progression.
Yeah.
And then just keep doing that. And you do that enough times, you'll be, in terms of being strong compared to the average person, you'll be incredibly strong compared to the average person. Because the one thing you have done is you have consistently applied stress week after week after week after week after week, without these big interruptions where you go, I'm injured, or I'm overtrained. You won't get overtrained with that, because you complete 5x5 That means you haven't failed, and then you put 2.5 on. You should have gone through a recovery cycle, more than enough of a recovery cycle to do that again and again and again, and you'll be much
And
stronger than a normal person.
a component to that, say something like a 5x5, or even like the model that you were talking about, people shouldn't be working to complete failure in these sets, right? Like that fifth set of 5, what should that fifth rep be like? Should it be complete failure, or should it be, say, if we use like reps in reserve, you still have a few more reps in reserve?
It really depends, because if you are a
Mm-hmm.
beginner, you could have technical failure. You could
Yep.
be metabolically be fatigued. If
Yep.
you don't if you don't judge your rest periods properly, you could
Yeah.
fail for so many different reasons. But
Yeah.
yeah,
True.
I think ideally you wouldn't necessarily fail, because one
Yeah.
thing you do want to do is practice this kind of like good form as a beginner
Mm-hmm.
novice. You want to practice good form. You want every rep to look really good.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to look like every single rep looks completely different to the last. Um, not as a beginner. You want
Yeah.
it to look as good as it can, and not necessarily fail. Because again, going back to what did you start with? You started with nothing. You weren't doing any squats. You weren't doing any training, or you were, but you were doing like, I don't know,
Like a bro
three,
split or something.
3x12.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
different, a
Exactly.
completely different world. Three
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
12.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, then you're up in the naturally the intensity will go up because the rep range is lower. Recruiting
Mhm.
more high threshold motor units because it's high for you. It's not necessarily high your genetic potential, nowhere near, but it's high for you right now. So you are recruiting what you need to recruit. Um,
Mhm.
so you could fail. I wouldn't say it's a prerequisite not to avoid failure completely. I think it could happen, but I think it's the consistency is what's key
Mm.
with all training. That's actually probably the underpinning thing with what I believe in terms of becoming an elite athlete. So starting from the very beginning
Consistency.
is consistency. You want to apply
Yeah.
a consistent stimulus over and over and
Mhm.
over again. Recover, stimulus, recover, stimulus, recover, stimulus, and not
Yeah.
have these kind of interruptions in training that lead you to stop doing the thing that's going to get you where you want to get to. Do as much
Yeah.
of the thing that you can recover from that gets you where you need to get to, and
Yeah.
just be
And
consistent.
that's across so many sports. Like I chatted to the Ultraman world champ last week about like cardiovascular stuff, like running, and like
Yeah,
how to improve at running. And that was his advice too. He was like, whatever you can do consistently is the best thing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. If you can keep
yeah,
turning up, that's the best thing. Then doing your PB squat, and then what, you're taken out for 2 weeks because you
yeah,
know, injured your hip or something
yeah,
like that because you
yeah.
went too heavy.
Well, the only time you really go for it is in competition. That's when you really
Yeah.
start to, if you need to push the
Hmm.
boundaries. But you
Yeah.
likely won't need to do it as often if you're really consistent with the training, because you will just gradually get yourself there. And that's why I think people can't really get their heads around this kind of like this. It's probably 10 years of that.
Yeah.
And it's not
Yeah.
for, and the thing's absolutely fine. It's not necessarily for everyone. Not everyone's wired the same way where they're like, I'm happy doing the same thing over and over and over again to
Hmm.
achieve the thing that I set out to achieve 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely fine. You'll
Mm.
get more enjoyment out of variability, and you won't get enjoyment out of it. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
enjoy
Yeah.
it, you're made for like the sort of higher end sports, especially individual sports.
Yeah. Because that's what it takes, right? Is the long term view
Yeah,
and the micro improvements
but you
over a
won't
long
find
period of time.
you will not find any one of them, any one of those people who turn around and say, "I hate it." They
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
They might get every now and again be a bit like, "Oh God, same old, same old." But deep down, they absolutely love the process and the. It's almost like a security blanket to a degree, I guess. It's like you know
Yeah.
exactly what's going on.